Hi, welcome to episode 26, Triads! Put an exclamation point because this is when we finally start getting to the stuff that most people think is what they're going to learn when they go learn music theory. Triads. Triads are a kind of chord. Chord. Chord is spelled like this, like chord. And chords are just more than one note, basically. Greater than one note. And there's kind of these generic words for different kind of chords, like a dyad has two notes. I had a really funny student. One time I wrote this word on the board and he pronounced it dyad, like a valley girl saying dad, like, oh, dyad, come on, dyad. And now every time I write it, that's what I see. Thanks a lot, Joey. For real, thanks a lot. And then the generic word for a chord with three notes is trichord. Triads are a specific, special kind of trichord, so we'll get back to that. And then we have all these other cool names that sound way cooler than they are. Tetrachord. A lot of music theory is made out of these two kind of chords, but specific versions of them. A specific kind of trichord we call a triad, and a specific kind of tetrachord we call a seventh chord. Don't try and make that make sense yet. We'll get there. We gotta keep going. You got your pentachords, your hexachords, but I like to call them sexachords because that sounds sexier. Septachords. You got your octachords. You got your nonachords. You got your decachords. I always forget the 11 one, but I mean, come on. Are you going to really play an 11-note chord? You can. It's cool with me. I don't care. Why am I telling you all this? I don't know. I forgot. Triads. That's what we care about. Let's talk about triads. Triads are a specific kind of note, and in a triad is always made out of a basic note we call the root. And the root of the note is what we name the triad after. So like if you have a C triad, then that means the root is C. Or if you have an E flat minor triad, that means the root is E flat. Or if you have an F sharp diminished triad, that means the root is F sharp. And then you have a third, and you have a fifth. And these are names, like they're helpful names because it also tells you the interval. The third is always some kind of third above the root, and the fifth is always some kind of fifth above the root if it's like in this certain special way. But don't think of them like that. I'm even going to cross those out. Think of them as, we call these things chordal members. I like that. I like that idea. The chordal members of a triad are things we call the root, the third, and the fifth. And I like to put quotes around them even because the thing you don't want to get stuck into is always thinking the third is going to literally be a third above the root, or the fifth is always going to be literally a fifth above the root. There's a lot of different ways to play chords. There's a lot of what we call voicings of chords. A lot of times the root isn't even the bottom note of a chord, but we still call it the root. A lot of times something might even look like a chord, but really it's a different chord, some of whose notes haven't got there yet, or got there too early, or stuff like that. So I like to just stress all the time that the chordal members, you should think of these as names. Like it could be like Bill, Angie, and Ron. I don't know. Those are the three names that for some reason popped into my head. It doesn't matter that they're called root, third, and fifth, though it does make sense, and you'll see why. But don't think of those numbers as numbers, and that's even why I always spell them out. I don't use the Arabic numbers for those, because you want to think of those as like a name of the chordal member that it keeps regardless of where you actually put it in the actual way you spell a chord. Okay, all that being said, I'm going to go back to the normal way of talking about it, where a note, the most basic way you can stack a triad is right on top of each other with 3 notes. And they would be on 3 lines of the staff or on 3 spaces of the staff contiguously. It doesn't matter what clef. It doesn't matter what register. That's why I didn't even draw a whole staff or a clef. This is the most squished way a chord can be. It can be spread out more, and we'll get to that. But I'm just going to talk about these most squished, and we call it root position when we have the root on the bottom. And when we do have the root on the bottom, and the 3rd on top of that, and the 5th on top of that, then yes, indeed it is true that this is some kind of a 3rd, and this is some kind of a 5th. Just trust me. Don't get too into that. It's honestly, it's the exception to the rule more than the rule that you're going to play a chord in this normal, most squished root position manner. But let's look at it. So if you remember from our bazillion talks about intervals, there's 2 kinds of thirds. We have a major thirds and we have a minor thirds. And you might also remember that there's 3 kinds of fifths. There's diminished fifths, there's perfect fifths, and there are augmented fifths. A perfect fifth is exactly 7 semitones. An augmented fifth raises that 1 semitone or 1/2 step up to 8 semitones. A diminished fifth is 6 semitones. When I say semitones, it's the same as a 1/2 step, and when I say 1/2 step, it's the same as a fret on a guitar. So if you play an open string, go up to the 7th fret, you got your perfect fifth. 6th fret is a diminished fifth. 8th fret is an augmented fifth. 4th fret is a major third. 3rd fret is a minor third. So a minor third is made out of 3 1/2 steps. I'll put these in parentheses. A major third is made out of 4 1/2 steps. A diminished fifth is made out of 6 1/2 steps. A perfect fifth is made out of 7 1/2 steps. And an augmented fifth is made out of 8 1/2 steps. Last time I mentioned that the diminished fifth, also called the tritone, it was known as the devil's interval. And here's another aspect. Of course, it is 6 1/2 steps, the devil's number, 666. So if we take all our kinds of fifths and all our kinds of thirds, that gives us potentially 6 different kinds of triads. I'm going to tell you, though, this kind doesn't really happen, and this kind doesn't really happen. If you go and play those, they sound like something that happens, but they're a different thing. If you play this chord, everyone's going to think you're a jazzer and you're playing a sharp 11 chord. And if you go try and play this chord, it's just going to sound like a chord in first inversion, and the bottom note isn't going to sound like the root at all. It's going to sound like the 3rd. And then the middle note's going to sound like the 5th, and then the top note's going to sound like the root. And so yeah, these don't exist. So look, there's only 4 kinds of triads. You got your triad that has a major third and a perfect fifth, and that's your major triad. You got your triad with a perfect major third and an augmented fifth, that's your augmented triad. Minor third, perfect fifth, minor triad. Minor third with a diminished fifth, your diminished triad. Pink. Don't I have a pink pen? Oh yeah, here we go. Major triads and minor triads are consonant. These are the only 2 consonant triads. In fact, yeah, you're never going to find another consonant triad. Everything else in music theory counts as dissonant. We'll do dissonant with this red pen. Dissonant, dissonant. Augmented triads are dissonant. Diminished triads are dissonant. They can't just hang around. They won't be able to sound like home. They won't be able to sound like tonic. Only major and minor triads can be consonant. we have symbols for these. An augmented triad, a lot of times we use a plus. A diminished triad, we use a degree sign. Major triad, sometimes a big M, sometimes Maj, and sometimes a triangle, and I've never exactly known where that triangle came from. Minor triads, a little m, or min, or kind of analogous to the triangle, sometimes a minus sign. And that makes sense to me because minus, minor. So let's spell all of these as on the root of C. So if I want to spell a C major triad, the root is going to be C. The third is going to be E. And the fifth is going to be G. That's the easiest one. A C minor triad, we'll have C, E flat, and G. So the only difference of a C major triad and a C minor triad is that the E becomes an E flat. So instead of having this interval of a major third, and then this interval of a minor third, those are swept. Now we have an interval of a minor third, and then an interval of a major third, all adding up to a perfect fifth. Our C diminished triad, we'll have a C, the minor third, E flat, the diminished fifth, G flat. And finally, our C augmented triad is going to have a C, the major third E, and then an augmented fifth, G sharp. Notice these are all versions of G and all versions of E. If you spelled this same thing with a D sharp, you would be wrong. It's not a D sharp, it's an E flat. And if you spelled this as an A flat, oh, so wrong. That would make it into an A flat augmented chord with a C in the bass. You don't want that. You still have to go alphabetical, right? So remember back when we talked about scales, how you have to have one of each alphabet. Well, when you're talking about triads, you have to go letter, skip a letter, letter, skip a letter, letter. So C, skip the D, E, skip the F, G. And no matter what kind of triad you spell, you have to use some version of those letters. You can't spell it the other way. Drives beginning students crazy a lot of times, especially ones who've come up more in a guitar or a digital environment where for some reason, like almost every recording or digital audio DAW workstation, digital audio workstation, all those things for some reason are obsessed with sharps. They call everything a sharp. And you would think there's no such thing as E flat because you only see D sharp. But yeah, they sound the same. But in music theory, it absolutely does matter. Okay, these are your 4 kinds of triads. Let's try it on another note. Let's go the devil's interval away from C. Can you think of what the devil's interval is above C or below C? Doesn't matter which way you go, you're going to get to the same place. Yep. Yeah, you're on the right track. Yeah, that's right, it's F sharp. So let's do this in a little better shorthand. If I write an F sharp chord, and I'm writing like just chords, if I just write F sharp, you kind of know that I mean major. Some people will write a lowercase letter for minor. I don't think that's ever quite enough info, so I always like to at least put the little m. If you are in a music theory class and your big M looks like this and your little m looks like this, that's not going to cut it. Make sure your M is really big and your little m has a stem. Otherwise, do the thing where you put a line under the big one or over the little one or something. Some people have to do that. Or just spell it out, Maj and Min, whatever. That's if you're in a theory class. I'm not here to grade you. F sharp minor, F sharp diminished, F sharp augmented. So F sharp chord would have, I'm running out of time. I'm just going to write these down. F sharp minor has an A natural and a C sharp. F sharp diminished has an A natural and a C natural. And F sharp augmented has an A sharp and a C double sharp. We haven't really talked about double sharps. We'll get there. I'm out of time. Goodbye.